A lot has changed in the AFC East this offseason, but there's one thing that hasn't changed. The Buffalo Bills are still the team to beat.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Well, folks, welcome in. We're going to talk AFC East today on the podcast. And sort of, this is herd mentality because I basically took two herd mentality submissions and made it into an AFC East primer episode where in segment one, we're going to talk about the new dynamics for each team and what adjustments will be necessary for the Buffalo Bills to deal with those new challenges. And then I want to do an All-AFC East team, a preseason All-AFC East team where I have the entire division worth of players at my disposal, and I want to pick a starting lineup offensively and defensively. So throughout this podcast, we're really going to get into the weeds with all the dynamics in play for the AFC East this year and highlight the best players in the division. So let's get into it, and I'll read the question, which comes from New Digital Blue. New Digital Blue is part of our Discord community, and they say, with the recent trade activity, this feels like a timely topic. How do the Buffalo Bills currently stack up against the rest of the division? What roster or coaching changes have our AFC East rivals made, and do any of those moves introduce new challenges or matchup issues the Bills will need to adjust for? Also, is there a chance we'll see something this season that reignites or intensifies any of these rivalries more than we saw last year? So let's do it. Let's talk about these teams and some of the new challenges that they present for the Bills and challenges that they are facing themselves this year. And let's begin with the Miami Dolphins, who have obviously been in the news all week, trading away Jalen Ramsey, bringing back Minkah Fitzpatrick, trading away Jonnu Smith after having the best season a Dolphins tight end has ever had. And then, of course, signing Darren Waller or getting him out of retirement to be part of the replacement strategy for Jonnu Smith. And it's been an offseason for Miami. To me, that signals a shift in how they want to play football, especially on the offensive side of the ball, where the investments have been in some bigger offensive linemen, James Daniels at guard. They traded up for Jonas Savianaya out of Arizona, a big physical guard. They bring in Larry Borum to be kind of their sixth offensive lineman, who's big physical guy. They add two bigger running backs, Alexander Madison in free agency. Then they drafted Ollie Gordon. They bring in Nick Westbrook-Ikine in free agency, who's a big power slot receiver that specializes in blocking. This is a team, to me, that based on their personnel moves are going to become more power run oriented and want to, in particular, run the ball between the tackles. It's been a wide zone rushing offense, a lot of crack toss, attacking the edges. And I think this shift is very similar to the one that we saw Sean McVay make with their offense, where it was outside zone, outside zone, outside zone. And then they invested in a bunch of guards and interior players and blocking type players and became more of an inside run team. And I can see Miami kind of pivoting that way. Now, of course, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, still around the speed demons that they are and the spacing problems that they can present. But I think they're getting excited about that potential to run the ball differently mixed with some explosive elements in the passing game. Obviously, the story offensively for Miami is Tua Tagovailoa and his health. It's not just concussions. He's had hip injuries. He's had foot injuries, ankle injuries. And if Tua's healthy, I think they're going to be a good offense. If he's not healthy, they're going to sputter. I think we have clearly seen that over the last 3 years when Tua's in versus when Tua's not in. So you can think of whatever you want about Tua as a quarterback. He certainly has his flaws and limitations, but there's no denying that team is really different when he's available at quarterback. Defensively, this is where I find most of the questions. Obviously, the biggest question would be Tua's health, and we won't know that until the season plays itself out. But defensively, the secondary is littered with question marks, especially at corner, and they'll sign some corner. It'll happen. They'll sign Rasul Douglas or Asante Samuel Jr. or Stephon Gilmore, something like that. That'll happen. But I still have questions about that overall corner group. I'm not super high on Kader Kohou. Cam Smith has a ton to prove. They bring back Minkah Fitzpatrick, and I think Minkah Fitzpatrick's a fine player. He's not the ball hawking, take away the football guy. Hasn't been over the last few years. A lot of coverage assignment busts. And so, that'll be a big part of what they need is for him to be an answer for them because their safety group otherwise is very, very unproven. Now, a lot of their defensive formula is going to be rooted in Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips and guys that really didn't play last year coming back and finding their form. And we know the variance of outcomes that typically comes from guys coming back from injury. You just don't know. Obviously, Zach Sealer, Chop Robinson up front. I like their linebackers, but they are going to need this defensive line to make the impact it's capable of because I think even if they sign some veteran corner, there's going to be questions about that secondary. So I think Miami could be anywhere from a team that's picking in the top 10 to a team that is competing for one of the wild card spots in the AFC. The New England Patriots, obviously a lot of changes here. Mike Vrabel coming in as the head coach, and this team had tons of resources this offseason, cap dollars like crazy, and they brought in a ton of talent. And that's expected when you have the most cap space in football to bring in a bunch of players, and they certainly overpaid for a lot of them, but they needed to, right? They had to elevate the floor of their roster, and I think they've done that. I think that's part of my thoughts on New England over the last probably 5 years, really dating back to the Mac Jones's rookie season. When I was comparing them to the Bills, I never was able to take New England seriously when you just go player for player and realize that they just don't have enough talent to really be a serious threat. Even in the one season that they got to the postseason and got bounced by the Bills, they just didn't have the dudes, right? It's Jimmys and Joes over X's and O's, and their Jimmys and Joes were not as good as the Bills' Jimmys and Joes. Now they've elevated that, right? They're a much more talented football team all around. Obviously, a lot has to come together, right? New coaching staff, a ton of new pieces. That's the big story there is how does it all come together? Because I think from a roster perspective, they're probably about league average. I think they've went from a bottom of the league roster to a league average roster. And Drake May is obviously an exciting young quarterback. I'm not happy that the Patriots have him. He looks good to me and looks like a guy that's going to put it out there for his teammates, that has dynamic physical traits. And, hopefully he doesn't pan out, but I fear he will. And they've got a good ecosystem and an improving ecosystem around him. So a lot has changed there offensively, defensively with the investments. I still think they need a lot to work out for them at receiver. They need some offensive line moves to be right. We need to see what type of pass rush they can generate. But I think this is a team that might be the biggest threat to the Bills this year, especially if Tua's going to have injury issues. I worry most about the Patriots. Not that I have a great level of concern that the Bills won't win the division, but I do think that New England is the team that has closed the gap the most of any team this offseason. Now, they had the longest to go, right? They were the team that was scheduled to pick number one in the draft up until they beat the Bills in Week 18 in a meaningless game for Buffalo. So they had the longest to go, but I think they have done the most to close the gap. As for the Jets, I look at the Jets kind of like I have recently the Arizona Cardinals a couple of years ago or the Houston Texans a couple of years ago, where they had so much to figure out that it wasn't going to happen in one offseason. It's going to take a couple, right? So I think they have found a few answers, particularly with their offensive line. I think it's in really, really good shape, which we have not been able to say for a long time. But whether it's quarterback and rolling the dice on Justin Fields and hoping that he can be the next reclamation project at quarterback after we've seen Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold kind of turn things around, That's a major question mark. I don't think they have a meaningful weapon in their passing game outside of Garrett Wilson. I respect Garrett Wilson a ton, but I don't think they have anything else that concerns me at all. I think their defensive line depth and the starter next to Quinnen Williams at D tackle is a major question mark. I think their cornerback 2 spot opposite of Sauce Gardner is a major question mark. So they don't have it all figured out, but I think they made a great hire in Aaron Glenn as their head coach. And I like what they've done with their offensive line in particular. I still think they're a little bit away from being a team that I think is competing for a winning record. But I do fear that they've made a good head coach hire in Aaron Glenn that can give them a chance to get this thing turned around. So to sum it up, as I laser in on what's the biggest adjustment for the Bills for each team, for Miami, I think the biggest adjustment for the Bills is dealing with their reimagined run scheme and their defensive line possibilities. If that team's going to have a healthy Brad Chubb and Jalen Phillips and Chop Robinson and Zach Sealer, and they drafted Kenneth Grant, I think there's a lot of potential for what that D-line can do. As for the Patriots, the adjustment for the Bills is that it's truly a team that has elevated talent with an emerging young quarterback. You're not just going to be able to go and show up and big boy them because you have better players, right? They're going to have a little bit more of a punch back based on some of the talent they've been able to acquire. And for the Jets, the adjustment for the Bills, it's the unknowns on both sides of the ball. I mean, Justin Fields is a unique quarterback that's unlike what they've had. It's a new coaching staff defensively. With Aaron Glenn, they're going to play a lot more base defense and blitz a whole lot more and play a lot more man coverage. So it's the unknowns on both sides of the ball with a head coach that I think knows what he's doing. And I'm not sure that's been the case for a while with the Jets. All right, so that's kind of a high-level conversation on each team. Coming up next, the preseason AFC East, All-AFC East offensive team. Excuse me. We'll break that down for you here next. Be sure to stick with me. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. In fact, I check the app every morning to see what type of bonuses are there, and this morning I woke up and they had a 30% profit boost on a same-game parlay for any Major League Baseball game, and of course I took advantage of that. I'm also checking out football futures bets, and there's some spicy ones for the Bills. How about this? The Bills, they have them at plus 360 to win the AFC. So if you think the Bills are going to the Super Bowl this year, you can get that at plus 360. The over-under for Josh Allen's passing yards are at 3,775.5. Come on now. You think he's going to get that? Go smash the over. How about James Cook? You think he's getting 1,000 yards? Well, they have the over-under set at 950.5 for rushing yards. So check it out, folks. If you're new to FanDuel, it's a great time to sign up because new customers can bet just $5, get $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, folks, the preseason All-AFC East offense as selected by me. And I definitely approach this with a this year mindset. I didn't draft a dynasty team. This was who is the best player at each position right now in the AFC East if I had to field a team for the 2025 season. That was my methodology. And, it's important to me that I share my methodology. At quarterback, come on, who this is going to be. It's Josh Allen. There's not even an interesting argument to be made for any other quarterback in this division. Drake May, I think he's going to be really good. Justin Fields, not in the conversation. Tua's optimized for what they have going on in Miami. It's Josh Allen, and it's a chasm between him and the rest of those quarterbacks. At running back, got some guys to think about here. There's Devon Achane. There's Breece Hall. Ramondre Stevenson. My choice is James Cook. I think James Cook is the best lead running back in this division. There's certainly a lot of explosive elements with Devon Achane, and I think you can use him in a lot of different ways, particularly in the passing game, but I don't think he's even close to the between the tackles runner that James Cook is. And I don't think that much of Breece Hall, and I don't really take those Patriots backs seriously when foiled against James Cook. So James Cook, my choice for running back. At tight end, I'm going Hunter Henry from the New England Patriots. And there's not a lot of contenders here. Darren Waller, not thinking about him. Mason Taylor, I really like the young player for the Jets. They drafted him in the second round. It came down to Dalton Kincaid and Hunter Henry. And you know I'm high on Dalton Kincaid, but we just got to be honest that Hunter Henry has been the proven player in the NFL. I like the idea of Kincaid. I think he has a much higher ceiling this year, but I got to go with the player that's proven more, and that's Hunter Henry at tight end. So Josh Allen at quarterback, James Cook at running back, Hunter Henry from the Patriots at tight end. We're going with 3 wide receivers. The first receiver that I wrote down, I think this is the best receiver in the division. It's Garrett Wilson from the Jets. Garrett Wilson hasn't had a good quarterback yet, and he's put up 3 1,000-yard seasons to start his career. And I actually recently went back and watched the Bills game against the Jets. It was the one game that James Cook missed, so I don't know if that was the first or second Jets game, but whichever one he missed. And you could just tell Garrett Wilson's he's a problem. He is a very, very, very good route runner. We'll see how he does with Justin Fields, his college quarterback. They had a lot of production in college, so curious to see how that goes. My other 2 receivers, both Miami Dolphins, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. I know Tyreek, neither one had the season they were supposed to have last year, and I think Tua missing a good amount of time plays into that. And Tyreek Hill had a wrist injury, and he had some bad weight on him. Obviously, I think he's still one of the most dangerous weapons in the NFL. I know that Bills Mafia does not like him. I don't personally like him, but I also recognize the skill set, and I think he's got to be on this. And Jalen Waddle as well, where I think Jonnu Smith and their lack of a run game kind of took away from Waddle, but he's even been a volume player at times where there's a skill set there that's dangerous, right? That speed element, the yards after catch element, the verticality. I mean, Wilson, Hill, Waddle, you don't got a lot of size in that wide receiver room, but you have unbelievable explosiveness and separation skills and route running. So that'd be my receiver core. I think the only other real receiver I gave much thought to was Khalil Shakir. And I can't bump Wilson, Hill, or Waddle for Khalil Shakir as much as I love him. Let's get to the offensive line. We'll go to the offensive tackle position. I had a pair of Miami Dolphins at receiver. I have a pair of Buffalo Bills here. Spencer Brown, Deion Dawkins, comfortably the picks for offensive tackle. It's really not close. Who would you even think about? Austin Jackson from the Dolphins? I don't think so. The Jets have 2 good young tackles in Olu Fashanu and Armand Membu, but we still have a lot to learn about both players. Dawkins and Brown performed last season at such a high level. This is almost as obvious as the quarterback being Josh Allen, is that the tackles would be Dawkins and Brown. At guard, one of my guards is going to be Mike Onwenu from the New England Patriots. I think what's really impressive about Mike Onwenu is that he's been a consistently high-level performer despite horrible scheme and horrible talent around him. He still continues to be an impact starter. And I don't think there's that many good guards in this division. I think this was kind of looking through this. I realized that there's not a lot of high-level guards. But he stands out for sure. The other guard for me is going to be Elijah Vera Tucker from the Jets. Still a young player that's had some injury stuff, but I think even through some injuries, and he was pretty healthy last year, the fact that he's been in and out, but whenever he's in, he still plays at a high level, impresses me a lot. And big year for him. It's a contract year, but I just didn't have that many contenders. You think about Osiris Torrance a little bit, think about James Daniels, but he's also coming off of an Achilles injury. Pretty comfortably Mike Onwenu and Elijah Vera Tucker for me, which then gets us to center. And I'm going Connor McGovern. I think he's the best center in the division. I think Joe Tippmann from the Jets is a player that he's going into his 3rd season. I think he's got the potential to be the guy in the division at center after this season. And I think Aaron Brewer is awesome, but I think he's awesome for the Dolphins in that scheme. I don't know that like in a vacuum you love Aaron Brewer, but for the style of offense that Miami plays, I think he's unbelievable. I think the most complete proven center in this division is Connor McGovern. So the offense, quarterback Josh Allen, running back James Cook, tight end Hunter Henry, receivers Garrett Wilson, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle. Offensive tackles Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown. At guard, Mike Onwenu and Elijah Vera Tucker. My center is Connor McGovern. Coming up next, the defense and the final tally for each team. We'll do that here next, folks. Be sure to stick with me. All right, welcome back. Don't miss tomorrow's conversation. I'm going to be joined by Joe Miller, and we're going to talk about the new stadium and saying goodbye to the current stadium. Joe Miller's been a longtime season ticket holder. He's a PSL owner at the new stadium. I asked him about that experience. We talk about the transition, what we're going to miss about the current stadium, what we're excited about for the new stadium. That's coming your way tomorrow. I know it's the 4th of July, but I want to give you a little content over the weekend. I can't just do a podcast on Thursday and say goodbye until Monday. So you got something to look forward to on Friday that you can listen to whenever it makes sense for you over the holiday weekend. All right, let's do the preseason All-AFC East defense as picked by me. At defensive end, there's some really good defensive ends in this division, but they're all coming off injuries. I'm not comfortable dealing with it. I'm not going to put Jermaine Johnson down with the Jets. Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, I'm not touching those guys. You think about Joey Bosa for the Bills, but I like how he finished the season. But the two choices that I'm going to make, number one is Greg Rousseau. Greg Rousseau is still a player that I think is ascending. Only played like 400 something snaps of defense in college, coming off career highs across the board last season. And I still think he's ascending. He's a comfortable choice for me based on Chubb, Phillips, Johnson, all coming off injuries. Then the other one, I'm going with second-year player Chop Robinson from the Dolphins. I was a big fan of him coming out of college. I think he met my expectations as a rookie. Explosive pass rusher that I think is going to obviously take a step in year 2. So Rousseau and Robinson, my picks for defensive end. At defensive tackle, I'm going with Quinnen Williams from the Jets, Zach Sealer from the Dolphins. You think about Christian Barmore, you think about Milton Williams, who just signed for all the money in the world to go to the Patriots, $26 million a season, the 7th highest paid defensive lineman in the NFL. But I'm not touching him. He's never even played more than 48 snaps in a season. He's never had more than 5 sacks. I think that was kind of a crazy contract. You think about Ed Oliver as well. But Quinnen Williams, Zach Sealer are, to me, the most consistently disruptive interior players in this division. I mean, Zach Sealer, I think, is criminally underpaid. And Quinnen Williams, if they could get him an actual running mate, good luck, because that guy's really, really special. So my D-line, Greg Rousseau, Chop Robinson at end, Quinnen Williams, Zach Sealer at defensive tackle. Linebacker, I think this was probably the most difficult for me because I think there's a lot of players that I look at and I think of them very, very similarly. I'm going with Quincy Williams from the Jets and Jordan Brooks from the Dolphins. But if you want to tell me Terrell Bernard should be one of them, fine. If you want to tell me Jamian Sherwood should be one of them, okay, sure. You want to tell me Robert Spillane from the Patriots should be one of them, I'm not going to fight you. But the reason I pick Quincy Williams and Jordan Brooks is I think, number one, Quincy Williams is the player that has the most recent and current amount of sustained success. Of course, Matt Milano has the best resume of any linebacker in this division, but what has he done over the last 2 years? I can't put him in there. Jordan Brooks is a player that I think gives you size, athleticism, coverage ability. He's a better downhill player than Bernard. So that's who I went with. But again, I think as long as your choices are two of Quincy Williams, Jordan Brooks, Terrell Bernard, Jamian Sherwood, Matt Milano, or Robert Spillane, I don't think you're wrong. I personally went with Quincy Williams and Jordan Brooks as my choices. Slot corner, Taron Johnson. I don't think there's much of an argument to be made there. Who's in Michael Carter from the Jets? I don't think he's in the same ballpark. Marcus Jones, no. Kader Kohu, no. Slot corner, comfortably Taron Johnson. At corner, this was a little challenging because I think you've got 3 elite NFL corners to choose from. Christian Benford, of course, is one of them. I've been telling you for the last however many months that he's been every bit of a top 5 corner in the league over the last 2 seasons, and I'm not backing off of that. I can fight that so easily. The other one is where it gets interesting, where I think it's down to Christian Gonzalez from the Patriots and Sauce Gardner from the Jets. I'm going with Christian Gonzalez because I think he's less of a punk than Sauce Gardner, if I'm being honest with you. And I think he's got better ball skills. I think he can take away the ball better than Sauce Gardner. I think Sauce Gardner is an elite NFL corner. I get that he's grabby. I know nobody from Bills Mafia wants to give him any credit. I understand that. I think he's a really, really good player. But I think Christian Gonzalez is a player that I think has better ball skills. That's why I picked him. So Benford and Gonzalez, my choices at corner. My safeties, we're going to go Andre Sisco from the Jets, coming over from the Jaguars this year. Good size, good ball skills. The other safety is going to be Minkah Fitzpatrick, new Miami Dolphin, even though I'm not in love with Minkah. But who are the contenders? Am I going to put Jabril Peppers in there? Am I Taylor Rapp? Kyle Duggar, who had a disaster season last year. I think the safeties are a little lacking in this division right now. Hopefully Cole Bishop can have something to say about that. But my safeties are Andre Sisco from the Jets, Minkah Fitzpatrick from the Dolphins. So my back 7 on defense, linebackers Quincy Williams, Jordan Brooks, slot corner Taron Johnson, corners Christian Benford and Christian Gonzalez, safeties Andre Sisco and Minkah Fitzpatrick. So the final tally, there's 22 spots available, and I have 8 players from the Bills, 6 from the Dolphins, 5 from the Jets, and 3 from the Patriots. So there you have it. Big AFC East conversation here. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed kind of hearing my thoughts on the new challenges in the division, and then, of course, highlighting the best players in the division. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today. Don't miss my conversation with Joe Miller, which will drop on Friday. We've got Bills Squad live at noon Eastern time on Thursday. And, of course, daily content all year long. Whether it's early July, in the middle of the season, March, we're here for you daily talking Buffalo Bills football. So come on back. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.